So, firstly, a really, really big thank you to all of you for joining us today. I know how many invitations we all get to events and webinars and various kind of things like this, and I know how precious everyone's time is. So, it's really good of you all to have agreed to spend a precious little slither of your day with us today. We've got people joining, I know from the US. So, good morning. I hope the day's looking good. A few of you in the UK and Europe. I hope you've all had a good day. And looking forward to sharing hopefully something really valuable and interesting with you over the next kind of 25 minutes or so. So, for those of you new to us, I'm Brooke. I'm one of the co-founders of People Made. We're a culture agency. We help businesses be better. We help them attract the right people, foster the right ways of working, ultimately to make sure that they deliver their strategy and deliver for their customers. And so we work across things like EVP and employer brand, culture diagnostics, and change work. But today we want to talk about our research work, particularly around the things that we've done in the realm of brand perception studies. So this is how your brand is perceived, particularly within the talent marketplace. So what do candidates and potential candidates really think about you? And we've been really lucky over the last few years to partner with some amazing brands. So folks like Facebook and Meta, Stripe, McLaren, Wendy's, AstraZeneca, a real range of incredible organizations. Many of these brands hire both at scale. They hire a lot of people, but they also hire really targeted individuals too. Like they're really working hard to find that, precious talent around things like, AI, for example. Lots of activity, people trying to find the right people in that kind of space too. So for both of these challenges, both the really broad and the really narrow, it was really crucial for them to understand how the people that they need to attract really think about them. And for many, this kind of vital insight eventually formed the basis of their entire EVP and talent strategy. And we've learned a huge amount of ourselves along the way, the process of refining and improving our thinking and methodology around how to run, interpret, and gain value from these perception studies. So, really excited to hand over in half a beat to Amity, who is head of research at People Made, where she can share a few thoughts around what we've learned along the way. And a final one from me. Please do use the Q&A box. You've got like route one access in to a really brilliant, talented, and experienced individual here. So any questions that you have around research, talent perception, or anything else sort of adjacent to that topic, please do pop them in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to answer the questions as we go. Right, enough of me. Amity, over to you.
Thanks, Brooke. And yeah, just to reiterate, thank you everyone for joining today's webinar as well, because you do get a lot of insights to these kind of events. As Brooke mentioned, I'm on the strategy team at People Made, and I also head up research and insights for People Made. So this topic is very close to my heart, and I'm really excited to be hosting this session today because I think it's such an important and valuable conversation. So many organizations are putting strategies in place to attract talent without really understanding the perceptions that they're starting from or what external talent are actually looking to hear from them. So getting clarity on that not only helps build stronger, more authentic employer brands, it also creates a much better experience for talent too. And just to really drive this point home and put it into perspective, 77% of companies conduct some form of brand tracking, yet only 41% actually measure return on investment for their employer brand. And despite the fact that 78% of those organizations invest in employer branding in the first place. So while we're investing in it, we're not always measuring it or measuring its impact. And I think what's even more interesting about this, or perhaps more telling, is that only 18% of those organizations surveyed felt that they were able to clearly communicate the impact and ROI of employer branding work back to their business. So there's a huge opportunity here to make that investment work harder, to ensure that the work that's already being done is being promoted and people understand that it's important, but also to ensure that for talent, it feels relevant and it feels meaningful and it feels measurable. Oh, and it is measurable. So with that in mind, I just want to start by clarifying what we actually mean by employer brand sentiment research, because it's a relatively new area of research. So, it's helpful to make sure that we're all starting from the same page. And essentially, employer brand sentiment is how talent feel about your organization as an employer and the perceptions that they have that shape those feelings. So, a good way to think about it, or how I like to think about it, is to draw a parallel with consumer branding. So, just as businesses aim to understand how consumers perceive their product or their corporate brand, this helps you understand and measure your employer brand. And it does this by helping you explore, how talent perceive you as an employer. For example, do they see you as an employer of choice? And if so, why? What's driving that? And from there, identify where there might be opportunities to strengthen the employer brand, whether that's addressing sort of perception gaps or leaning into distinct traits or qualities that really set your organization apart from competitors or talent competitors and make it uniquely appealing to talent. So now that we've looked at what employer brand sentiment actually is, let's talk about why understanding it is so crucial for your talent strategy. And first, I mean, we've touched on this before, but it deepens understanding by really getting under the skin of how external talent think, how they feel, their needs, their attitudes, their motivations and expectations, enabling organizations to design talent strategies that really genuinely resonate and feel relevant. Second, it helps to remove ambiguity. So, employer brand sentiment gives you clear data-led picture to build from. It replaces assumptions with evidence, and it helps you make strategic decisions with more confidence and more clarity as well. And thirdly, it measures and tracks impact. And I think this is important because brand sentiment isn't fixed, it evolves over time. So it's shaped by what's happening in the world around it, as well as by the influence of your employer brand activity or initiatives. So by measuring sentiment on an ongoing basis, you are able to see whether your EVP and talent strategy are landing as intended and track how those perceptions evolve as your brand and as the market change. And ultimately, then hopefully demonstrate the impact of your efforts with real numbers that tell a story that others in the business can understand. When it comes to how we approach this at People Made, we like to take a mixed method research approach. So, what that means is combining both qualitative and quantitative research methods. That means looking at not just the numbers, but also digging into the stories behind them and the context shaping them. And that is what really helps us build a very comprehensive and rich picture that explains the what and the why behind talent perceptions. So, another thing that really sets our studies apart and just sort of building on that is our team. Our researchers, they're not just researchers, they are experts in culture and employer brand too, which means they understand what's needed. They know how to draw out truly useful insights, and they can translate those into recommendations that are, strategic and genuinely helpful for your talent strategy. And finally, because research is just sort of one part of what we do at PeopleMade, it does sit within a wider consulting practice. So, building on that last point, we don't just hand you the report and walk away and say, yeah, cool, done, see ya. We work with you to bring those insights to life, shaping what the next steps look like together so that they are realistic and feel right for the organization, not just sort of handing you a big deck and walking away. So, what does this look like in practice? Well, as I mentioned earlier, we take a mixed method approach. So, on the qualitative side, oh, sorry, we're jumping ahead. So, on the qualitative side, we run focus groups and interviews with external talent to explore how people perceive you as an employer and why. And the goal here is really about understanding talent's mindset. So, again, those needs and motivations and their perceptions, how they see you versus your competitors. We also seek to speak to recruiters as part of this as well, so that we get that wider market perspective and learn from people who are on the front line speaking with talent every day, because they will have that sense for how the market context is shifting and changing. And they really help us to see the forest for the trees, if you will, connect the dots between the individuals and understand why trends and changes are happening. On the quantitative side, we conduct surveys with external talent. And really, this is to kind of put numbers behind those perceptions, validate and size up the findings from the qualitative research, shape your employer brand, and then also measure and track its performance over time with data on things like awareness, sentiment, and attraction factors. So, to bring this to life a little bit for you, I wanted to share a few real world examples from our work. And below, we have snippets from our studies around talent needs and drivers. Although, of course, what I should say is that the brands and the numbers have been adjusted to protect confidentiality here. So, unfortunately, this really nice sort of attraction factors that goes 60, 59, 58, 56. The real world isn't that neat. But you'll see sort of what we get, and I'll talk you through the examples as we go through them. So this first example comes from a project with a tech client of ours, showing how talent currently feel about working in the tech industry, and I guess what's really driving sentiment in the industry. And in this case, the rise of AI is really creating an uplift in positivity, bringing a renewed sense of energy and a possibility back into the sector. In the middle example, we look at attraction factors. So here you can see that, here we're giving an understanding of which elements matter most to a specific talent group when considering a potential employer. Unsurprisingly, as is pretty common, compensation ranks the highest, but just below that are factors like protecting user data and growth and development, which also feature as crucial priorities. And, that is not always the case. And finally, we have retention factors. So here we can see that work-life balance is both a number one trigger for looking for a new role and the biggest reason people choose to stay. On the other hand, though, while people might change jobs for compensation and for a higher payout, when it comes to what actually keeps them in a role, compensation doesn't even make the top five. And instead of key factors like team culture and manager relationships, they play a much bigger role when it comes to retention. So this insight was particularly useful for this client because they were struggling with losing talent to competitors offering higher salaries that they couldn't match. And this insight was really powerful because it helps them pivot their retention strategy away from just compensation to prioritize factors that they could influence, like the team experience, culture, and managers as well. So for maximum impact in that case. On this next slide, we have some employer brand insight examples. So again, while that was talent needs and drivers, now we're looking at employer brands and how they stack up against competitors. So again, we've changed the brands and the numbers here for confidentiality as well. But starting on the left, this example shows the breakdown of sentiment. So how talent feels towards an employer. And what was really interesting in this case is that what the client initially thought was a negative perception issue actually turned out to be a bit more of a knowledge gap issue. So talent actually had a positive opinion of the company, but they couldn't really say why, and they didn't really know much about it as an employer or the opportunities that it offered beyond the fact that it just had a good name. And that distinction was actually really powerful because it completely changes how you approach the challenge. It becomes more of an awareness and education piece than it does changing a narrative piece. In the middle, we have brand associations. Now, these are the traits and characteristics talent associate with your employer brand. So we have statements in here, things like is innovative and fosters an inclusive culture. And we ask talent to sort of rate how much they strongly agree with that based on your brand or competitors' brands. And I think building on this previous example of the client that had a positive sentiment, but not really a distinct understanding, but talent didn't really have a distinct understanding of it. What's really interesting here when we start to look at the associations that they had with the employer brand is that we see that while most clients that we work with will have really clear distinctions in associations, this client actually didn't. There was a lot of sort of average scoring associations. So for this client, the one that was stuck in this neutrality zone, as we began calling it, we actually saw those like average and similar scores across all traits as a reason to kind of dive in further. And we did. And when we focused on the data and we looked at just the talent that had the higher brand awareness, so who knew this client well, we could start to see a stronger, much more distinct story emerge and different perceptions emerge, further reinforcing the insight that it's not just a perception issue, but a knowledge issue. And finally, on the right, we're looking at consideration. So essentially here, this is a pretty simple metric, but if we look at if the right job came up, what we asked talent is if the right job came up tomorrow that met all their needs, what percentage of talent would consider a role at this company versus its competitors? So here we have on the left, that sort of the light blue is the top three. So who placed this company in their top three? And then in the dark, we have who would consider. And so now that you've seen what it looks like, let's talk about the kinds of outcomes that you can expect to see from this work. And I mean, there are a lot, and it really is about how much you want to extract from the insights themselves. But to name a few, it can help employer brand teams to make more informed decisions about their EVP or refine their positioning in the market. It gives you measurable evidence of impact showing how your talent and people strategies are performing over time, especially if you're tracking sentiment consistently. It helps to refine messaging as well. So your recruitment marketing how it more directly speaks to talent. Gosh, that was a bit of a tongue twister for me. I don't know why. Basically, so that you can steer your message and refine it in line with what talent's needs are. You can also test messaging as well. So sometimes we have been known to put a few key messages in the survey as well to see how it's resonating with talent, both branded and unbranded. And finally, it feeds into the employee experience too. So it's not just about attraction, it can help you shape programs that will sort of strengthen attraction and retention over time internally, not just externally. So it's not about insights for insight's sake. It's about giving you confidence, clarity, and evidence to make thoughtful decisions that really strengthen your employer brand. And that's it. I guess over to everyone for any questions. I've talked a lot now, so apologies if I've just hit you over the head with a lot of information, but hopefully you found that interesting and come away with something useful.
Do feel free to use the Q&A box. Thank you, Amity, for that. If you have any questions at all, pop them in there. You can also contact us after. I can see one that's come through, Amity, about how frequently should you be doing these studies?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I suppose we did mention that it should be done in an ongoing manner, but for an initial study, I guess it really depends on where you're at with your business. For an initial study, if you've done no work like this in the past, um, we would recommend doing a combination of both the qual and the quant so that you get that complete picture before you start to kind of monitor it over time. That said, every organization is different, so you might already have a very good understanding of what talent's perceptions are. You just want to put some numbers around it, or you might have survey data, but you aren't really sure what's driving the results. So we are really flexible and it kind of depends on the size of the challenge. But our general approach is to say, get the complete picture and then from there, track it over time with a survey yearly or 6 monthly if you work in an industry where perceptions change quite quickly to capture that difference over time.
Great, thank you. We've got a question here about, do you think this is valuable for smaller and larger companies?
Definitely, I think so. It depends. It's a harder one to track when it comes to smaller companies because obviously you want to speak to talent who have awareness. But I suppose, unlike what you might find if you just do sort of online scanning of external talent perceptions, so if you might use a tool that kind of scrapes the internet, you're going to find that that kind of tool really challenging because there won't be enough kind of content out there about you and your business. This is actually really powerful for small businesses because when we go out to recruit talent, it's very targeted. We go in with a brief of exactly who we want to talk to. So we can find the people that you might recruit and speak to them about their business and what they think about you and help you understand what that reputation is, regardless of whether it's, a large pool of talent that you're going after or a really niche one.
Great, thank you. Then we'll just give one more minute for any other questions, if anyone has any. And if not, I think we can give you all a little bit of time back. Oh, we've got one more. As part of this service, so you help employer brand leaders build a business case for doing a sentiment analysis.
Yeah, we can, and we have in the past. I guess it really depends. Some of them come to us with the case already very well formed in their minds. But yeah, we can work with you to help you build the case for it. I suppose one of the key things here is really around helping you present, track the ROI. So if it's internally, one of the key things that people really lean on is how can I demonstrate the return on investment of our talent attraction strategy? So that could be a really clear one. But it really depends on your needs. So we would work with you on that.
Great. We just had another question. Is employer culture something you're asked about a lot? Is there a way of measuring that?
So actually, we are just about to release an employee culture survey, will be separate and more internally focused. But yes, when we look at the sort of attraction factors, these are the kinds of needs and considerations that people are looking for in an employer. We ask them things like, fosters a psychological safety, has a strong culture, has strong management as well. So we go into detail. It's not just about the kind of hard facts of compensation. We do go into the other more lifestyle factors like work-life balance as well, and culture, which is really important. We also then add them to the associations as well. So we then look at how that maps for different companies. So whether a company is known for having a good culture or not.
And then, are there any platforms that you have seen used to good effect, social listening, etc., for sentiment analysis?
So the best one that we have found for this is Brandwatch, and we use it as well at a sort of higher level. It helps to get us an initial read on where sentiment is. I suppose the challenges around it are, though, that those platforms are usually created with consumer branding in mind or with consumer brands in mind. And because they scrape the internet, it's hard to sort of cut down the sample size to just talent, really, unless you focus only on review sites. And review sites often come with an emotionally charged sort of response to certain things. That said, I think of them, Brandwatch is a good one. And we certainly use it to get a sort of initial read and to capture the themes that are coming through from the review sites as well, so that we can see why people might join, stay, or leave. But for a really targeted understanding of why people choose you versus your competitors or what talent are looking for, I think you can only really know that by going straight to the source.
Great, thank you so much. I think we'll end it there. I'll be circulating the recording after in case you want to share this with any of your colleagues or you want to rewatch if you've missed anything. And of course, if you have any questions or want to discuss this further, feel free to get in touch with either one of us, and we'd be happy to help. But yeah, have a great rest of your day. Thank you again, Amity, for your presentation. And we'll see you again soon.
No worries. Thanks, Imogen. And thanks everyone for joining and for your questions. Have a great rest of your day.